It is a claim that is breathtaking in both its audacity and its danger. From some of the very same people who are building the infrastructure to help Donald Trump tear down the very pillars of our democracy should he prevail in November and return to the White House. Allies of the ex-president, many affiliated with the right-wing Heritage Foundation, are now claiming that the candidate who will disrupt the peaceful transfer of power won't be the repeat offender, Donald Trump. No. In their telling, in their delusions, and in what amounts to an epic case of projection, they're accusing the Biden campaign of doing so. Stunning new reporting from the Washington Post on a discussion of supposed threats to the 2024 election by Trump allies reveals this, quote, the presentation delivered at the Heritage Foundation's Washington headquarters stated as a given that the Biden administration was already engaged in a sweeping conspiracy to use multiple forms of federal power to influence the presidential election. It did not supply any evidence. Quote, as things stand right now, there is a 0% chance of a free and fair election. That was Mike Howell, executive director of Heritage's Oversight Project. Quote, I'm formally accusing the Biden administration of creating the conditions that most reasonable policymakers and officials cannot in good conscience certify an election. Only one candidate and his supporters have done that, have refused to say if they will accept the results of the 2024 election, and it is not President Joe Biden or any Democrat.
President Trump, the question was, will you accept the results of the election, regardless of who wins? Yes or no, please.
If it's a fair and legal and good election, absolutely.
Will you accept the results of the 2024 election, no matter who wins?
Yeah, I'll accept it, but I think, there's no massive cheating.
Senator, will you commit to accepting the election results of 2024? Bottom line.
Well, at the end of the day, the 47th president of the United States will be President Donald Trump, and I'm excited to get back to low inflation, low unemployment.
Wait, Senator, yes or no? Yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024, no matter who wins?
That is my statement.
Will you commit to accepting the results of this year's election?
Look, Dana, I totally plan to accept the results of 2024. I think that Donald Trump will be the victory. And if it's a free and fair election, Dana, I think every Republican will enthusiastically accept the results.
What about 2024? What about 2024?
We will see if this is a legal and valid election.
Stop right here for a second. Lifelong Republican Chris Krebs described the 2020 election as the, quote, most secure in America's history. Bill Barr said there was no evidence of fraud. So we have to think of this delusional and desperate but very strategic attempt to somehow rhetorically turn the tables on the Democrats, to depict them as the real threat to democracy as part of Big Lie 2.0. And if the first iteration of the big lie was used to justify everything from baseless lawsuits to the deadly violence that we saw on January 6th, this new version is no different, but perhaps more dangerous. The Washington Post reports that a Heritage Foundation staffer said this, quote, the exercise would lead Heritage to file more litigation over election procedures. He also said it should help the public resist, quote, psychological operations that he claimed were being used in 2020 and are being used again. He didn't say who supposedly ran the operations. Quote, the upshot is that we will see a contested election, the likes of which we've never seen, said a professor who helped lead the simulation. Quote, if we see the kind of manipulations we saw in 2020, I wonder if average Americans who are supporters of Donald Trump will swallow that so easily as they did in 2020. The idea that Trump supporters swallowed anything or took the 2020 election results for what they were, lying down, is absurd. We all saw what they did. We all saw what happened on January 6th. A mob of Trump supporters sent by Donald Trump stormed the United States Capitol, injured, maimed, and led to the deaths of police officers, came incredibly close to harming Vice President Mike Pence and his family as Trump supporters and members of the mob called for him to be hanged on sight. Now, in response to this so-called war game presented at the Heritage Foundation, the Biden campaign responded this way, quote, this document is nothing more than an attempt to justify their efforts to suppress the vote, to undermine the election, and ultimately another January 6th. Attempts to sow doubt about the integrity of the 2024 election months ahead of Election Day by Trump's allies gaining steam is where we begin today with some of our most trusted reporters and friends. National political reporter for the Washington Post, Isaac Arnsdorf, is back. He's bylined on that reporting in the Washington Post we led with. Hello to someone's dog. Also joining us, voting rights attorney, founder of the site Democracy Docket, Mark Elias, is back. Chief political columnist and host of the podcast Impolitic for Puck, MSNBC national affairs analyst John Heilman's here for the hour. And my friend and colleague, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, is here. Isaac, since this is your reporting that inspired the way we are starting today, take me through what you and your colleagues are reporting.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a weird day at the Heritage Foundation yesterday afternoon. Didn't totally know what to expect with this transition integrity project, which was they described as like a simulation, like a role-playing game, where they had different people assigned to different parts to try to game out what might happen in the election. But part of what was so stunning about it was they reached the conclusion they reached to from that was that the sitting president, as they described their finding, the sitting president is the biggest danger to the peaceful transition of power. But that was as if Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election had never happened. And instead, they were talking about, as a given that it was already the case, never mind what they were predicting or imagining, but already the case, that somehow the Biden administration was engaged in using the Small Business Association and the Border Patrol and all levers of federal power, the Justice Department, somehow to influence the upcoming election. Although there was, the evidence that they provided for this, for example, was that they had sent a camera crew to a housing complex in the vicinity of Charlotte, North Carolina, and were asking people there if they were citizens and if they were registered to vote. And they said that some number of people said yes, but they never followed up to actually see if those were people who were actually registered to vote. And they were presenting that as proof of fraud.
John Heilman, there's something so insane about this that we sometimes brush it aside. We decided to lead with it, but I don't want to shave off the insanity, if you know where I'm heading here. So this is from the Post reporting. Barbra Streisand kidnapped by Hamas. Antifa, Black Lives Matter protesters taking over a migrant detention facility. The FBI arresting Donald Trump 2 days after winning the election. These were among the far-fetched scenarios imagined by a simulation of threats to the 2024 election, showcased on Thursday by the right-wing Heritage Foundation. In the 2024 project at Heritage, President Biden was played by former Senator Robert Torricelli. Those war games included contemplating surprise emergencies such as the Barbra Streisand kidnapping. We have spent 9 years, I think, maybe looking away from some of the most insane things that are planned. This is a plan that's on paper. This is a group that is inextricably linked with former Trump administration officials and people who are on lists to be future Trump administration officials should he prevail. Trump is ahead in most of the battlegrounds, and we thought today was a good day to really understand what the plans are for rigging the November election.
Well, I wanted to let you know, Nicole, that in my weekend war game exercise that I do over here at my place, you sometimes have come and done that. We're deciding between a body snatcher thing and a Martian invasion thing this weekend. So if you have a point of view about which one of those we should do, let me know. Yeah, I mean, I think this gets back to a theme that we have returned to of late, particularly because of the Project 2025 kind of exposure that it's been getting, not getting as much attention as some other stories recently, but the fact that the kind of cat's out of the bag, and I do think that it speaks to a lot of things here. It speaks to the way in which, first, it speaks to the total capture of all of these, not just of the MAGA movement, that the total capture of the Republican Party and all of the associated and ancillary extra campaign and political organizations. The Heritage Foundation, once upon a time, was a mainstream conservative organization in Washington, D.C. Now they are not just a MAGA organization, but they are doing war games of this kind, I think largely, maybe not large, let's say, but at least partially, to continue to curry favor with Donald Trump. These are like so much of this stuff is performative. And it's performative. These are new kinds of rituals, bizarre rituals that are enacted by previously respectable institutions in order to curry favor with the cult leader, with the dear leader, with Donald Trump. You do these things in order to get in his good graces and to maintain your credibility. I'm sure they have had this plan for a very long time. But as Trump distances himself, at least publicly, from some of their work, I bet they were really happy to be doing this. There's kind of there's a quality of this way. Hey, you never know what's going to happen with Trump. We got to keep currying favor with him. And certainly, as we were talking the last time I was on the show, every element of this matches up to the description that we talked about that day where I'll recall an Atlantic writer, I'm sure, who said, that the January 6th insurrection was a dress rehearsal. This is literally a dress rehearsal, only it's kind of a cosplay dress rehearsal. It's kind of like the Renaissance weekend kind of a craziness, but it's still a dress rehearsal, and we still got to take it real seriously.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.